Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ave Maria Press Professional Development Webinar Series. In this webinar, Kate Fassbender, founder and executive director of the Hem of Christ, a ministry of care and support for those living with dementia and their caregivers, will explore ways to help those in your parish living with dementia remain close to the sacraments and grow in their relationship with Christ. My name is Erin Pierce. I am the Ministry Resources and Special Initiatives Manager at Ave Maria Press. Everyone in the audience is muted today, but you are able to ask questions. Questions can be sent to our presenter using the questions section of the GoToWebinar panel, and I'll read as many of those at the end of the presentation as possible. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you via email tomorrow. With that, I would like to welcome and introduce our presenter today. Catherine Fassbender accompanies those on their dementia journey. By magnifying the importance of creativity, faith, and human connection, she provides creative care, education, and innovative ways to look at how we live with dementia. Working in both the for-profit and nonprofit worlds, Kate is the creator of the Dementia Letters Project, a dementia education and life enrichment service, and the founder and executive director for the Hem of Christ. Kate is a classically trained musician, visual artist, and theater maker with an academic foundation in the creative arts therapies. Kate is a certified dementia communication specialist and certified dementia practitioner. Kate, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and make you presenter.
Right.
Okay, looks good. I'll let you take it from here.
Sounds good. Thank you. So it's lovely to be with you here this afternoon. There's no way we could dive into everything possible that you can do, but my hope is that you walk away with some hope and the ability to start this conversation within your faith community and within your families. So I want to start by sharing this phrase with you. Go home and get your affairs in order. If you have been diagnosed with dementia yourself or a loved one who is accompanying somebody through that process, you likely have heard this phrase, either these direct words or something very, very similar. Go home and get your affairs in order. That is how the medical and clinical worlds frequently see dementia, as a death sentence. But we know that that is not true. Many good years can happen between the point of diagnosis and the point someone actually dies. And as Catholics, as Christians, our job is to help make sure that those lives are full and vibrant and filled with hope and joy. So this is what the world is telling us about dementia. Go home and get your affairs in order. The doom and gloom. Accompanying this with, for those of us who are Catholic, pre-2020, I used to say, imagine being told that you could not go into church, that the door was locked and you could not receive any of the sacraments. Well, we all have experienced that a little bit because of the events of these last 3 years. And while we may be returning to the pews, returning to the confessional, there are many living with dementia that are not supported in doing that, or in a care community where they have yet to bring Mass back into the community. And so as we think about dementia and the church, as we think about our faith and how we can best serve those living with dementia, keep these two things in mind, that our society is telling us that dementia is a death sentence, and that faith is not supported or encouraged. When we know that when somebody can continue to live their faith, they can live a life fully alive. So you see on the screen here, my grandparents. Oh gosh, I didn't think I'd get emotional, but I see this as a movement of the Holy Spirit. They are why I do what I do. And they lived two very different care community experiences. My grandfather had what I refer to as faith as a task. It was offered within his care community that he lived in for the last 5 years of his life because it was something they should do. Mass was offered maybe once a week in the rec room, where there was a piano that was frequently out of tune. There were art supplies in one corner, exercise equipment in the other, and it was just something that they felt they had to offer, and so here you go. Other than that, his faith was not encouraged. While my grandfather was there because he had a massive stroke, and it is possible he had dementia, he was never diagnosed with dementia. My grandmother, on the other hand, was diagnosed with dementia in 2005. And in 2008, she moved into a different care community than my grandfather lived in, one that was originally founded by the Franciscan sisters. And although they no longer operated the location, they were frequently visible. And so my grandmother, during her life, was able to attend daily mass, the rosary. Priests and sisters were in and out praying with and for the residents. And she had what I refer to as a faith as care, where faith was honored, it was included in the care plan and not just something they felt they had to do. And so their stories in observing the differences that they've had, plus all the other experiences I've had working professionally in dementia, led me to start the Hem of Christ. It was originally just a small little ministry program that I had wrapped into the Dementia Letters Project. But in 2017, I have what I call my Holy Spirit frying pan moment, where it became clear that I needed to take what I was doing and pull it out and put it into its own organization. And so that's how the Hem of Christ has started and continues to work. My role really is to make sure that those living with dementia have everything they need to live that life, to remain close to the sacraments, to continue to grow in faith and remain in community. So a little bit of the landscape of dementia. I'm not going to bog you down with a lot of uh, facts and figures because these are easily found just by Googling dementia in the United States or dementia in your state or in your county. But dementia is an umbrella term. It is not a diagnosis. So if a doctor is to tell you you have dementia, your job then is to ask them, well, what type? There's vascular, Alzheimer's, Lewy body, frontal temporal, many, many types of dementia. But the dementia word just really describes a grouping of symptoms that we often relate to memory. But while it starts there, it's in the mind and moves throughout the body. So it really is a full body disease. We in the United States, this is from last year, so it's probably a little out of date now, have 16.1 million unpaid care partners that are serving 18.5 billion hours in caring for loved ones. 1 in 3 individuals are diagnosed with a form of dementia, which is the equivalent of about 5.7 million individuals. So while we can say a lot of people have dementia, not everybody we work with over the age of 65 or over the age of 80 will have dementia. But it is a significant group of individuals. And so we as a church have an obligation to walk with them. Much like we walk with many other different populations, we have a role that we need to play in making sure that they can continue to grow closer to Christ. And it's part of having an intergenerational church. We focus as a church a lot on the youth and young adult and making sure they stay in the pews or come back to the pews. But we also cannot neglect those living with dementia because those youth sometimes are the care partners for those living with dementia. And you can be as young as, I think the youngest person I heard that has been diagnosed is 16 years old at point of diagnosis. So this is also not just an older adult disease. It can really span the lifespan. So getting into kind of what I want to share with you today, and again, this is just an overview. We could dive much deeper. I'm just hoping that this starts a conversation. And these are 3 pillars for the hem of Christ, how I operate, how I explore, what I can provide. And that's education, prayer, and community. So education, the main role of that is to build up a literacy of dementia and how dementia and faith can intertwine, and how we can support somebody living with dementia who is still coming to the pews, who's still going to the confessional, who is still participating in parish and diocesan events. The next is prayer. How can we pray with and for those living with dementia? And how can we use prayer as almost a life enrichment tool intentionally in using sacred art for programming, or sacred art, or holding of a crucifix or a Bible, something tangible to help somebody find peace and hope on the dementia journey. And the other is community. We know that isolation is never good. And those living with dementia, including their family care partners, live oftentimes in isolation. The burdens of care, the stress, the suffering overshadows everything else. And community and friendships fade away, sometimes because of fear and that stigma and that doom and gloom narrative that we are fed constantly about what is dementia and what is life with dementia. So we as a church can remain that community for individuals. So looking deeper a little bit at education, building up that literacy that I mentioned. I have 3 points here that I really kind of want to focus on, and hopefully they will inspire other things that you can do within your parish. The first is the Purple Angel. Some of you may be familiar with Dementia Friendly America and the Dementia Friendly Initiative, where trainers go out into the community and train you how to serve and support those living with dementia, whether you are a grocery store, a bank, whether you are a church or a senior center. How can you serve those living with dementia better because you understand what dementia is? And the Purple Angel program is very, very similar to that, only I prefer it because it was actually created by somebody living with dementia and is continually supported and shifts by the feedback of those actually living with dementia. So we can hear firsthand what they need and what they want in their community. And so how the Purple Angel program works is it is free. It's a low-cost option for your parish, where your parish staff and lay ministers can be trained in the foundations of dementia. Because when you have that foundation, even just 60 minutes of a conversation about dementia, you can then go into relationship with the parishioners and fellow people in the pews who have dementia without the fear of, well, what do I do if they say this? What do I do if this happens? That fear is erased because you have that knowledge, you have that foundation. There's a phrase that is frequently used that if you know one person with dementia, you know one person. And so with the Purple Angel programming and any education program you go into, it's not going to give you a full black and white. If X happens, then go to Z. If A happens, then go to C. It's not going to give you that, but it's going to give you the foundation that you can then build a relationship upon that and with that. The other is, this happens a little self-promotion here, a Wealthy in Faith workshop, which is something that I created, but there are many people throughout this country, both independently and through organizations that are doing amazing work in terms of providing training in what does a dementia-friendly church look like, and what does faith and prayer look like. It's more common with our Protestant brothers and sisters, but the knowledge they share applies to us, applies to Catholics very seamlessly. We just need to then add the rich traditions of Catholicism on top of that. And so this kind of takes that Purple Angel training and brings it into the pews. This could be something that you offer your parishioners. You could offer in small groups. You can offer in Catholic schools, pre-K all the way through college even. How does one live a life of faith while living with dementia? And the workshop really focuses also on how as we as care partners, as family members and loved ones, how can we sit with grandma and pray with her? How can we, maybe through now our understanding of dementia, when we are a Eucharistic minister or an altar server, support those who are coming into the church while we, through our specific roles of lay minister, whatever that may be. So these first two really dive into the meat of what dementia is, how does it engage with the world, how do we become relational with those living with dementia, and then the nuts and bolts of just general care practices. The next one that I usually recommend are studies of pastoral letters, or JP2's letter to the elderly that I believe was written in 1999. And when it comes to these documents, I say none of them are outdated. It could be written in the 80s, in the 60s. It could have been written last week. They're worth diving into because it's important for us to understand, what does the church say about growing older? What does the church say about living a life of faith with other physical and mental struggles that may have come into life? What does the church say about healthcare? By understanding this, we can also then better minister to those living with dementia and their care partners. And this can be done as a formal church mission, or it could be done informally, just a few families gathering, or one family saying, for Lent, we as a family will read this letter and we'll dive into what the church is saying and pray about it and see how we could incorporate this into our faith life and how we serve our community. So for me, education is very important, to have that nitty-gritty understanding of dementia, but then also, what does this church say about humanity and suffering and the various elements that may not specifically be about dementia, but are woven into the dementia experience, such as growing older, healthcare, and those sorts of things. The next one is prayer. And the main one that I drive home frequently is the sacraments. We need to help those living with dementia remain close to the sacraments. So doing whatever we can to support care partners and those with the diagnosis, helping them get to Mass, daily Mass on Sundays, holy days of obligation. How do we connect them to the Eucharist? How do we connect them to adoration? The one that is often tricky, that I think is the first to leave, is going to confession. How can you go to confession if you don't remember what to do when you see her in the confessional? If you don't remember sins or different things that you may want to confess, how do you do that? Well, we still can. In that way, I personally recommend that you share with your parish priest that, I have dementia, but I would like to remain as a regular attendee of confession, and see what he says, see what happens. That's one of those things that, I cannot sit here in a webinar and tell you exactly specifically how to do it. It's based off of your priest, who you are, and where you are in your dementia journey. But know that throughout the dementia journey, you can still go to confession. It does not need to be something that you remove from your life because you have this diagnosis. The second is retreats. Retreats are a great way for care partners and those living with dementia to continue to grow in faith. It may seem a little odd, but it's possible through busy persons retreats, through audio retreats or self-paced retreats. This format, more so than Bible studies or other parish faith formation events are done in such a way where there's both passive and active participation, which is very important when you're living with dementia, to leave room for the good days and the bad days, for days when you want to be fully engaged and days when you just may want to sit in silence or sit with someone and observe their, their day-to-day task. Leaving that room for both passive and active participation, because we know that Christ still seeks us and he never forgets us. And so by offering retreats, we leave room for that. We leave room for that prayer. We leave room for those moments when we just maybe all we can do is say, come find me, Christ. Come, Holy Spirit. And the other two are actually tangible resources that I can direct you to. The first, many of you may know about it by now, especially, is Hallow. Whether you use it, the free version, or you get a subscription, it is the one area where I really encourage people to use tech in care. Again, because it allows for that passive and active participation. There are audio prayers, so you aren't relying on yourself to remember all the prayers and the mysteries of the rosary. You have somebody guiding you through that process, whether you are living alone and only have a care partner coming in and out, or you live with family, or you live in a care community. It is a resource that will allow you to continue to grow in faith and to pray on those days when you may need a little more support. And for care partners, it is also a great tool because it does enter into that meditation prayer that is very, very healthy for care partners to enter into. When you are a family care partner, whether you have help or not, you can get lost in the day-to-day. And you yourself are losing your community. You are losing financial stability in some cases. You are losing a career that you've spent years building up. You're putting your life on pause, and all these things by being able to enter into what Hallow offers. It's an easy way that you can wrap into your day, whether you're driving to a doctor's appointment or back from the grocery store or wherever it may be, or doing housework, where you can kind of find peace and support while also having guided prayer, so your mind doesn't go into the worry. It helps keep your mind, your gaze on heaven and towards Christ. And the other is the Peace with Dementia Rosary. It is both a book and an organization. There's a podcast, and Matt, I believe, has a couple other resources, including a wonderful newsletter. And it is a resource that not only can help you pray the rosary as somebody living with dementia, but find ways to have a faith-based care. There are a lot of beautiful things that he does in terms of supporting the care partner and the individual with dementia in the day-to-day of life, and shining a light on how somebody of faith can live and walk this journey. The next one, and the one for me that is the most important, is community. Again, I've talked a little bit about loss. Somebody living with dementia, that diagnosis information gets out. Even some people even try to keep it hidden for as long as possible. Suddenly people stop visiting. Careers end. Family members stop visiting. Family members, there's tension there. There are, fights even sometimes with families. And so we as a church have this beautiful space to step into that and to remain in community, so no one again has to live in isolation. And here are some ways that I usually recommend to start looking at how we as community can play an active role in dementia care. So the first is spiritual support groups. This is an alternative to maybe dementia support groups that you may attend through your local Alzheimer's Association chapter or other community or county programming. And if you're interested in starting spiritual support groups, I highly recommend checking out the Association of Catholic Mental Health Ministers, because what they have done for mental health in the church and spiritual support groups, it's why reinvent that wheel? They have amazing resources, and they do beautiful work that can be applied to those living with dementia and their care partners. The other is by offering parish meals, ways to break bread. And, with those living with dementia, food plays a really important role in our life, but also once you have dementia, because it is a simple way to connect. We all have food memories. We all have foods that we like, foods that we hate, foods that connect us to different times of our life. And while we never want to try to force somebody living with dementia back into a specific time, by breaking bread with them, we are allowing them to, again, have that active or passive connection to our community. And this doesn't have to be above and beyond what you already offer. If you have a Lenten fish fry, have maybe a group of people that gather that are clearly marked as, they're purple angels, that individuals with dementia can feel comfortable attending and then sitting with them. Or, there are many other ways, maybe after Mass, having a coffee and donuts and having a space that's not too loud, that's appropriately lit. A lot of fluorescent lights are not always good. And not a lot of distractions, but you can come and after Mass sit in community and enjoy that. And think of how often we like to hang out in the narthex or the vestibule of church, catching up with people who, after Mass. Those living with dementia love that still, but there's a fear there and there's the unknown there. And there are some days when they just have to get home after Mass. So providing space for us to break meals as a parish community is very important. The other is a speaker series or events. Have time, this kind of blends in with prayer and education. Maybe have programming where you invite people to come in and share their story of dementia and faith, whether they are a care partner or someone living with dementia. Kind of breaking that ice on dementia, instead of shushing it, inviting that conversation to happen within your community. Maybe you have just a regular speaker series that you would normally have, but make sure that you have the programs are in large print, or there's options to break out into smaller groups, so it's not one big group of individuals doing something so that they can remain in community. And the final is memory cafes. Some of you may be familiar with memory cafes if you are currently living with dementia or a care partner for someone with dementia. And they are beautiful programs that happen out in the community where a person with dementia and their care partner or a friend or another loved one, a neighbor, can come and for an hour not think about dementia, not think about memory and memory loss, but just be in that relationship of mother-daughter, of two best friends, of husband and wife, and do a program together. And you could host memory cafes either once a month, once a quarter, once a week if you're ambitious, whatever it may be that fits your resources. You can have those moments that build community. You can break bread at that by offering maybe a lunch or a breakfast, depending on the time of day. And you can also use it as a moment for faith growth by having the program that's featured at that memory cafe based in faith. Maybe it's a Visio Divina. Maybe it's a time slip storytelling session where you only look at religious art and tell stories about that art. Maybe you study the apparitions and you do it in a different way than you would say in a college or a high school setting. When we think about education, prayer, and community, we are not necessarily saying you have to do something more, but it's about how you present it. You can offer the same things that you offer in the church, do the same ministry programs that you have always done, but maybe slow down your speaking pace. Maybe change the time that you offer it so somebody with dementia can participate. It's all about learning how you can use what you already have, being aware of what dementia is, and then inviting them into what you are doing. Telling them that dementia is not an end, but a transition in terms of this is maybe how we did it before, but let's do something similar now that you have dementia. It's about finding that both and they both can participate and explore something new and do something in a different way that better suits them now that they are living with dementia. Because chances are there are many, many people sitting in the pews that have dementia and are not diagnosed, that have dementia themselves, that will be diagnosed with dementia within the next 5, 10, 15 years. And more than that, individuals who will be a care partner for someone living with dementia. We are all living with dementia in some way. And so it's about using what we have within the church in the beauty of our faith, of the joy, of the hope that we have as Catholics. One of the phrases I love to use that, JP2 says that we are an Easter people. We need to remember that in everything that we do, and that includes supporting those living with dementia. So here is some kind of a little more tangible things that I can share with you today. The first is the dementia-friendly Mass. What can you do to support those living with dementia within the structure and the beauty of the Mass? The first is give visual and audio cues. This means maybe if you removed that songboard from a visible spot, putting that back up and using it so people have a visual cue to know what page the hymn is going to be on, or what page in the missal to turn to for whatever it may be. Having prayer cards made out of the creed, of different prayers in large print that can be grabbed at the back of church before someone enters or right within the pews. One thing that we have to remember with that is that for those who are older who have dementia, they, for a good part of their childhood, not only had the Latin Mass, but then after the Latin Mass, they had the old translation. And so even though we've now been over 10 years into this new translation, they may or may not remember. They may revert back to the older translation. And so by having visual cues there, it may help guide that. And it's also about not judging them or looking at them if they happen to revert back to the old translation. Again, provide large print missals. Either, some parishes can't afford to just give them out to everybody, but maybe offer them for purchase so that they have access to them. Don't stray away from the smells and bells, as we've been calling it. So don't be afraid to use the bells, use incense. All this, of course, when appropriate, but using those sensory cues to guide those living with dementia. Have additional ushers. It's a great way to get more people involved in your parish if you are blessed with people who want to get involved. Have more ushers, and maybe have some of them wear purple angel pins or some designation so they can help those living with dementia, or help a care partner who's frazzled because they're trying to get their loved one who's in a wheelchair into where they need to go and do this and do that with maybe small children as well. Having additional ushers to help support those individuals. Thinking about the physical space. What does the lighting look like? Is it well lit? Is there a lot of clutter around the church? I mean, this is where, I'm seeing more and more churches put projectors and screens in. Not exactly a good idea for those living with dementia because it just adds more visual clutter. Is Father appropriately mic'd? Is a sound system in good shape? And you can, no matter where you sit in the church, can you hear what Father is saying or what the lector is saying? Again, that kind of goes down to minimize distractions. Use traditional hymns, hymns that they will know, that they'll want to engage in. Train lay ministers in dementia. So whether they are a lector or a Eucharistic minister, or they may be an usher or help in other ways in the liturgy, have them trained in dementia so that they can kind of pick up those visual cues of when somebody might need help and how to appropriately help them. Keep homilies short. This is one that I think a lot of people would like to hear, but keep it short because it'll help funnel the attention fully on the Mass and what's going on. Room for physical needs. Create spaces where people in wheelchairs can come and sit. Create room to move around the narthex. Don't clutter it with a lot of tables or different things. When you speak, speak slowly and clearly. And this goes from the cantor to father to the lector to the ushers. And move slower. Don't be afraid to slow down the pace. And I think this, that would benefit a lot of people if you would slow down. And offer support both before and after. This is kind of tied into with the ushers. How can you have people available to help care partners get families and their loved ones with dementia into church and back home? How can you walk with them during those moments as well? Okay. In the care community, I'm going to kind of go through this a little quickly because I see I'm a little late on time. But I have 4 things I tell everybody about care communities. Know, visit, engage families, and the chaplain. So know who within your parish, or who might be Catholic but at a different parish, who's in a care community, or even homebound. I include that in this as well. Visit them with or without a task. So don't be afraid to, visit them to drop off the Sunday bulletin, but also visit them just because. Don't be afraid to do that. Even if you weren't best of buds previously, don't be afraid to visit, especially if you're a familiar face that maybe you always sat in the same section of church. Engage in the families. Become part of their support network and engage in friendship with them, because they will be grateful that somebody is not dismissing them because of dementia. They need you as much, if not more, than the person living with dementia, especially if their loved one recently went into a care community. Life can still be very lonely once you are no longer the primary care partner. And the chaplain, support the chaplain in your care communities. If you know that there are Catholics in that care community and that chaplain happens to be Methodist or Presbyterian or whatever other denomination they may be, engage with them and tell them the importance of some of the traditions that you would like to see them support the residents in. And then again, if they are not Catholic, seeing if there's a priest or deacon that can kind of work with that chaplain to support the residents that are, whether it be skilled care or assisted living or independent living, wherever they may be. Post-care. This is often an area that we forget about. Once somebody has died who has dementia, their care partners, whether their loved one was in a care community or at home, frequently go through a different type of grief than a lot of other people may go through after a loved one dies, because this role of care partner that was thrust upon them has been just as quickly stripped away. And so if you know that the person they're caring for died, show up to the funeral, or if it's a private funeral, connect with them in some way during that moment. Don't disengage. And then maybe a month later, connect with them. Even if it's a simple hello after Mass, connect with them, visit with them, let them know that just because you may have been there when their loved one had dementia doesn't mean that now that person's gone, you're also leaving. Have a list of spiritual directors available at the parish office. This is, I think, an underutilized element of our faith growth when it comes to dementia and being a care partner. So if you have a list of spiritual directors that you can offer, even if they're fellow parishioners, even better, that you can offer as someone navigates life, not only loss of their loved one, but what does life look like now that I'm no longer a care partner? How do I put my life back together? And that's certainly a job greater than just that of what a spiritual director could do. Um, but it's that spiritual friendship, and that's unique to spiritual direction, that is hugely beneficial. Um, and much like we offer retreats for those living with dementia, offer retreats for people who have lost loved ones. Be there in support to help make sure that they can continue to grow in faith and to pray and be in community with others at the parish. Here's some resources that I want to share with you. There are 3 webinars that Ave Maria Press has done in the past. I highly recommend you go back to look at the recordings. Why are you afraid? I think this is great for care partners and even those newly diagnosed with dementia. Making the faith visible is another great way, because a lot of what Allison said can be applied to those living with dementia. And how to bring mental health ministry to your parish. Deacon Ed Schoner said a lot of things in that webinar, and the work that he does with mental health ministry, a lot of it overlaps dementia ministry and dementia care ministry. So that will be also a great resource. And then books and organizations, Peace with Dementia Rosary, as I mentioned before, great to know, have bookmarked, subscribe to the newsletter, own a copy of the book. Caring Kind NYC is a great organization if you are a family care partner and you want to learn more about the specifics of dementia. Fantastic resource. And then the Alzheimer's Foundation of America is also really good. And both of them also have care partner support hotlines that you can call in as well. So they aren't necessarily Catholic or Christian, but just in life, they're a great resource for walking the dementia journey. So then I will put my contact information up here. Feel free to call or text me, to email me, to set up a Zoom call if you want to dive deeper into what I shared here. I wish I had more time, because there's so much we could have done, but I wanted to make sure that I skimmed the surface so you at least have a place to start a conversation and a place to start praying about how you can better accompany those living with dementia, both within your parish and in the church at large. So
Thank
that,
you. Yes, thank you so much, Kate. Even though it was limited time, as you said, it really gave us some great information, and as you said, a place to start and to begin to talk about this. For all of you attending, I invite you to send in questions for Kate at this point. I know you mentioned Deacon Ed Schoner, and I know
mhm,
he and Bishop Dolan have been really working hard on getting mental health ministry groups in parishes. Is
mhm.
there anything official in church dioceses that parishes can look to in dementia care or support?
N Not really. The closest we really come is the work that I'm doing with the Hem of Christ and what Matt's doing with the Peace with Dementia Rosary.
Hmm.
There may be some Catholic Charities offices doing some work,
Hmm.
but it's not really there yet. I hope it grows into that, though.
Yes, yes. Well, you're doing good work to move it in that direction for sure. You mentioned purple angels,
Yes.
purple angel pins. Is this something
Mhm.
people can purchase or make on their own?
Yeah, so this is something that once you become a Purple Angel and you've gone through, the training it's only set to be a 45-minute brief kind of overview training of dementia. Once you're trained in that, and it's free again, uh, you will then get materials. You'll get stickers, you'll get for like your window of a parish if you want to put there, pins, lanyards, different materials that you can use to designate who has been trained.
Mhm.
But also then some resources that you can have, always maybe have a little bit on the back of your bulletin, a little blurb, or on the parish website, that sort of thing. You can get those resources there. And as you need more, you just contact whoever trained you and they can make sure that you get that.
Wonderful. So not just the education, but also some of the hands-on things to start this in your own parish or to raise awareness. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
We've had some webinars recently that talked about people with special abilities in our parishes and how
Hmm.
we can make it more welcoming for them. And so I think
Hmm.
this is very similar to what we have
Yes.
heard, and even having some sort of like pew card
Hmm.
stating, that there might be some people around you, right, that have
Hmm.
dementia. I think it's so important to raise that awareness for all of us,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah, yeah.
worshiping together. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the easiest ways is to put a blurb in the website on the website that's also in the parish bulletin, and uh, even an announcement made at church, or something as simple as having an intention in mass for those living with dementia and their care partners to kind of get that in the ears and minds and prayers of the parish community.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Yes. Do you find certain areas in the country have more need? And the only reason I'm asking this is because I think that people who are on with us today, they could learn a lot maybe from other parishes that are further along in how they're supporting their parishioners with dementia.
Yeah, the need is pretty universal
Hmm.
across the country, but what I can say is that if you happen to live in an area where there is an active mental health ministry, they in some ways are already two steps ahead of those who don't, because there is that understanding of, not everybody who walks in the church who needs something may be in a wheelchair or with a cane or have something visible. They
Right.
understand the visible and invisible needs of the parishioners. And so in many ways, they are kind of stepping in that direction.
Hmm. So that could be a great resource. And I know somebody sent in a question wanting to know the name of that group. So it's the Association of Catholic Mental Health Ministers is
Yes.
what you mentioned, and that's Deacon Schoner, Bishop Dolan. They're very active in that group. Yes,
Mhm.
yes. Well, this has been very, very helpful. So enlightening, so practical, and I think it just really helps all of us to raise our awareness of the different needs of people who we are worshiping with and how we can support those people. Community is so important as we journey in our faith, in our struggles and our joys. So thank you so much for spending this hour with us and sharing your experience and expertise. Um, I invite all of you, if you're interested in any of our books or resources, you can shop at avemariapress.com and receive 25% off your order using code webinar0321. And I'll include that in the email that I sent out to all of you tomorrow. Thank you so much for those of you who are with us for this webinar, and join us on April 25th. Rachel Kalaki. She is the founder and executive director of the Magdala Ministries, and there is a forthcoming book called Love in Recovery, and she's going to talk to us about how, as we've been talking so much about community in this webinar, how healing happens in community, specifically focusing on those dealing with sexual addictions. So we invite you to join us for that webinar also. Kate, thank you once again. Many blessings for
Yeah.
you and your ministry and all the good work that you are doing. And thank you to everybody else, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.